Wake up! What? Wake up! Wake up! Wake up! Come on, come on. Wake up!
Good morning. Thank you for watching, for joining the Black Press of America show. I'm holding it down a little solo for a moment. Neil is off this morning, but the conversation continues. Of course, you all know by now that yesterday, the Supreme Court handed down a decision that's already sending shockwaves through all the legal circles, and Black folks are upset. So today, we're not going to have any panels. We're not going back and forth. We're just going to let our folk talk. So we're going to play a collection of videos that you're going to hear directly from lawmakers, some lawyers, some talking heads. And this is going to be a very unfiltered conversation this morning. We want you to continue to participate in the show. So put your thoughts in the chat about yesterday's decision. I don't have anything. I could barely sleep myself last night. I don't have anything to say, but the only thing I have to say is I'll say, Clarence Thomas, your mama. That's all I have to say. Enjoy the show. Let us hear your thoughts about yesterday's decision.
I'm trying to keep myself calm here, Nicole.
Why?
Because I'm really upset.
That's okay.
You get tired of people playing fast and loose with your dead. Mm-hmm. And it was triggered by Obama. You know how many dead people are in the bottom of rivers in Mississippi because they tried to vote? Mm-hmm. How many dead folk, right? Folk who have wounds because of this. And here we are in this moment in the country's history, and we have to deal with this again. You see what I mean? So you think about the glorious revolution, our glorious revolution that produced the Constitution, the courts restrained it, limited. Dred Scott doesn't extend to us. You think about the Civil War, left 600,000 plus dead. Get the Reconstruction Amendments. We finally look like we're going to try to become a democracy. What do we get? The courts. Slaughterhouse cases. Reduces it. Rolls it back. And now here we are. We've only been a democracy since 1965. Barely then. 15 years later, Reagan is elected, Mobile decision happens, right? Roberts begins his career right there. And so here we are. It's exhausting. And so, yes, we have to get together. Yes, we have to mobilize. Yes, we have to organize. But these people play fast and loose with our dead. They play fast and loose with our sacrifices. They think they own freedom. They can give it to us and take it away whenever they want. And they think we're just supposed to sit here and take this, right? So first of all, I'm just going to express my rage at this decision. And then the second thing we need to do, of course, is to get about the hard work of trying to salvage this democracy as we've done since the moment we've been on these shores.
Where does the first part of it end and the second part begin?
The first part of it ends when we admit, honestly, that racism still occupies the throne of this country. There's nothing about our current days that should lead us to believe that we are in a post-racial world. There's nothing about our days. And then once we admit that, admit of our sins, then perhaps we open up a future for us to be otherwise. But the noble lie isn't noble at all. Racism still occupies the throne of this country. And that's clear to me. I'm trying to keep myself calm here, Nicole.
Why?
And we're doing that with the Supreme Court putting weights on our ankles. Okay, that's where we are. The Supreme Court's decision today is one of the most disingenuous legal opinions I've read in my entire life.
Janae, can you just lay out for the folks at home the current ground that we are all now standing on, given what the court ruled this morning?
Yes, we're standing on quicksand. We, as a democracy, are sinking. And we're doing that with the Supreme Court putting weights on our ankles. Okay, that's where we are. The Supreme Court's decision today is one of the most disingenuous
in this district. So understand this clearly. This ruling comes from me directly. In Louisiana versus Calais, a 6-3 Supreme Court didn't just strike down a congressional district. It erased political power from the community and called it constitutional. They didn't fix discrimination, they protected it. This wasn't legal restraint. This was a choice to weaken representation, a choice to dilute votes, a choice to tell certain communities that fairness has an expiration date. Let's stop pretending this court is neutral. It's insulated from accountability, yet comfortable deciding who counts, whose voices matter, and which forms of discrimination deserve to survive. At a moment when democracy is already under pressure, the court didn't act as a safeguard, it became an accelerant. This isn't about lines on the map, it's about control. It's about whether courts will allow racial discrimination to persist without remedy and quietly lock whole communities out of power. History will replay this moment, and it's going to show that when democracy asks for protection, the court chose to dilute it. I live in it.
Republicans are basically afraid. They don't think that they can go to the voters with the policies that they have put in place, with the candidates that they have. They know that the big, beautiful bill is wildly unpopular. They know that this war is wildly unpopular. Measles are up. The price of gas is up. There's nothing that they can go to the voters with. And so what they're trying to do is rig the election, cheat, so that they can ensure that they hold on to power that they illegitimately got as a result of the gerrymandering that they did a decade ago, hold on to that power in spite of what the will of the people might be. And so we as Democrats, progressives, and people who care about our nation's democracy have to fight back in every way that we can, doing what Governor Hochul is going to do, doing what we have been doing at the National Democratic Redistricting Committee to try to bring fairness to the redistricting process. I mean, you know, what they're trying to do is entrench power. And you do that by making it more difficult to vote, by drawing unfair lines. And that is the way in which they think that they will hold on to the power that they have. Republicans are...
Hello, everyone. So earlier today, the United States Supreme Court gutted the Voting Rights Act. This is one of the most important civil rights laws in this country. The court once again narrowed the ability for people to challenge discriminatory voting systems, even as the court acknowledged the long and well-documented history of voter suppression in the United States. This decision follows what I believe is a very troubling pattern, recognizing that discrimination exists, but limiting the available tools to address it. Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act was designed to ensure that voting practices that result in discrimination, not just those that are explicitly discriminatory, could be challenged. Now, this ruling weakens that protection. The immediate impact is clear. It will be harder to challenge racially discriminatory maps, voting rules, and election systems. States that have already been testing the limits of voter suppression now have greater leeway to implement policies that dilute Black and Brown voting power. And when communities lose political power, they lose influence over decisions about jobs, healthcare, housing, and education. Voting rights are not separate from economic opportunity. They are foundational to opportunity. And when access to the ballot is restricted, access to opportunity follows. So what can you do moving forward? First, we must be very clear about what is at stake. This is not just about election law. It's about who has the power in this country and who does not. Second, federal action remains critical. Congress has the authority to strengthen voting rights protections and must act to restore what has been lost. Third, state and local leaders must step up where federal protections are weakened. And they can do a number of things, from expanding access to early voting, to protecting fair redistricting processes, to investing in voter education and access. Fourth, the private sector and civil society have a role to play. Protecting democracy is not just a government responsibility, it requires collective action. And finally, we must continue to challenge these decisions in the courts and through public policy and through public pressure. These decisions are designed to create barriers, but they also underscore the importance of courage and civic engagement at every level.
Decision by this illegitimate Supreme Court majority strikes a blow against the Voting Rights Act and is designed to undermine the ability of communities of color all across this country to elect their candidate of choice. But we're not here to step back, we're here to fight back.
Yes.
Now, when this decision came out earlier today, it's an unacceptable decision, but not an unexpected decision, because this isn't even really the Roberts Court.
Mm-hmm.
It's the Trump Court.
Yes.
And what we would expect from the Trump Court is an effort to continue their scheme to suppress the vote and rig the midterm elections and beyond. Because these extremists have failed America in every possible way. They failed on the economy, they failed on healthcare, they're failing as it relates to this reckless and costly war of choice. The extremists have completely and totally failed America.
That's right.
So they've concluded, aided and abetted by the Trump court, that they have to cheat to win. Today's decision
Of Selma, Alabama, and I grew up in the shadow of the civil rights movement. The foot soldiers who marched across that bridge were my neighbors, my church members, my parishioners, and my babysitters. I am here to tell you that the progress secured by those foot soldiers is being erased before our very eyes. And we say no.
No.
We say hell no.
Hell no.
Not on our watch. Here in Congress, we're fighting back. This week, we launched a series of nationwide convenings led by the Southern Poverty Law Center and the House administration to hear from voters across this nation about the attacks on voting rights and the modern day barriers to the ballot box. Their testimony will help us and inform us in our legislative duties to revise and pass the John Robert Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, with the goal of fully restoring the protections of the Voting Rights Act. I am a daughter of Selma, Alabama, and I grew up in the shadow of the civil rights movement. The foot soldiers who marched across that bridge.
Standing outside of the Supreme Court, where the folks in that building, the conservative Trump majority, just delivered a massive blow to the Voting Rights Act. They are literally trying to squeeze the voices of the people out of their democracy. The context for this happening is the Trump economy. These are the folks who have taken your money through these Trump tariffs. These are the folks who have taken your doctors, taken your health care, and now they're trying to take your voice so you won't be able to hold them accountable. And so in the wake of this massive assault on our democracy, the answer to that is more democracy. The answer to responding to folks who would take your voice is to raise your voices now more than ever. You got to send a clear message come November that this democracy does not belong to politicians who are trying to pick their voters. It belongs to the people.
Should New York respond in kind by doing its own redistricting once the amendment, if the amendment passes?
I have long felt that we all have to play by the same set of rules, and the Republican caucus has made it very clear that they want and are setting rules of partisan gerrymandering. The Democratic caucus has tried to pass nonpartisan gerrymandering for 10 years. Republicans have rejected it. And so we have to all abide by the same rules. And so if Republicans are going to redraw North Carolina, if they're going to redraw Texas, if they're going to redraw and gerrymander every one of their states, then unfortunately, we have to provide balance to that until we get to the day where we can all finally agree to put this behind us and pass nonpartisan gerrymandering federally.
Typically, in the past, have carried a scarf with me that I carried on the day I was sworn into the House, and I carried on the day that I was sworn into the Senate. It allowed our great-great-great-grandfather to have the right to vote who had been enslaved in Georgia. And for some reason, I brought it today. He could not read or write. He had to sign an X at the bottom. This is the Returns of Qualified Voters in Reconstruction Oath from 1867. This document to me is representative of what we are trying to do here today. We are trying to live up to the ideals that were mentioned 250 years ago. That's what this represents to me. And so today, standing here with my colleagues, our goal is to make sure America knows that we will march, mobilize, organize, sue, go on the floor, stay up at 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning to stop things like the SAVE Act, because this is a coordinated effort and we are coordinated as well. I was 4 years old when the Voting Rights Act was signed into law. I did not think that I would have to be here defending it, but we will. We must.
Years ago, Trump asked, what did we have to lose supporting him? Man, the list is very long at this point. And the latest loss is Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, which guts the Voting Rights Act completely. This ruling basically allows white supremacy to create voting maps that weakens Black America's voting power severely. And already some southern states are drawing or redrawing their voting maps. And anytime a SCOTUS opinion causes the GOP to immediately start celebrating, even before the opinion hits, you should know it's really bad for Black America. But of course, the pro-Black imposters who are complicit in this opinion will try to explain it away. How are they complicit, you might ask? Simply, they helped Trump get reelected in 2024 and elected in 2016 by telling Blacks to vote the couch or vote Trump. They pumped so much disinformation into the Black community, they had many Blacks helping promote white supremacy. But you cannot blame the pro-Black imposters for all of it. Black conservatives and even some Black Christians played a part. But I tell you who's most responsible. The Black people who listen to those voices for their political and legal commentary, they are more responsible. Why? Because they value entertainment and misleading rhetoric over expertise, data, evidence, and common sense, quite frankly. Hence, the result is that the 2016 election helped Trump win and put 3 justices on SCOTUS, and those 3 supplied Clarence Thomas the additional 3 votes he needed to gut Section 2. And my question is, what tangibles have we really gotten from telling Black folks to do things that help white supremacists win presidential elections as well as congressional elections? It's gotten us nothing but a lot of setbacks. huge setbacks, as I've been warning you. But as bad as it is, those of us who understand what's happening, we know we cannot stop fighting. This fight continues. Tonight, I'm going live to explain what's happening, and I'll share with you what we must do next. Join me at 7:30 p.m. tonight.
Acknowledge your concern.
Here's where the disconnect comes in. I want to be clear about this. This is not a black and white issue. This isn't a political issue. It's not a Democratic or Republican Party issue. It's not about that. It's a morality issue. We're here. We've been here for 4 or 5 years. Commencement, we should have someone who's going to celebrate us. How can someone who goes against everything that we stand for and believe in, morality-wise, how can that person uplift me on my day of stepping into the real world? How can I don't feel supported. It's nothing that she can say that will make me feel encouraged to step out into this society. A society where the America and the country that I believe in, she don't have that same agenda. And I want to say something. Being conservative is not the issue. That's all right. We all have our own political views. But she's explicitly said, I'm a Trump conservative. Okay, if you believe in Trump, you support pedophilia, you support bigotry, you support racism. What else? Pro police, the same police that's killing our people, the same, and also she also supports ICE. She also would like to have, because I'm gonna say a concentration camp. That's what it is. So that's not what they calling it. But y'all want to bring one of those here to our state, to South Carolina. That's what y'all believe in. We don't believe in that. South Carolina State has a history of being activists and being proactive and standing up and believing in what's right. We have Hamilton, and Middleton. People that attended our school that have been activists and who have died for what they believe in. South Carolina State is an active representation of that. We acknowledge that every year. So how can someone who doesn't even respect that come and encourage us and uplift us at a graduation? Things that we have worked hard for. She don't. And let me say another thing. This lady is running for government. It just seems a little bit quick. Let me make sure I'm saying it right. Quick yeah. You know what I'm saying. I scratch your back, you scratch mine. What exactly is? Because I know we like to say, hey, it's a university. We have to do this to benefit our university. But what is the students, the people who are actively going here, the people who have the numbers and the majority? What are we gaining from this? Because to me and to a lot of others, it seems like she's doing this for her own personal gain. It's for her political agenda.
Thanks all of you for being here, and I will discuss concerns. I've heard your concerns.
No response or acknowledgement.
Hey y'all, this is State Senator Dion Tedder, Charleston and Dorchester counties representing. Just want to jump on here real quick. Just got done on the floor of the Senate in session, so catching up with everything that's happening. Just want to address the situation surrounding South Carolina State University. So for those that don't know, their school apparently, or somebody invited gubernatorial candidate Pamela Evitt to be the commencement speaker this year. The students overwhelmingly objected to that. Their right to do so. First of all, graduation is about the students, their families, and the sacrifices that they've made to get to this day. It's a special day. It is one of the most, if not the most important day of a student's life. It's a huge milestone. And so they took to protest today on campus peacefully, essentially voicing their concerns to the administration that they didn't feel this speaker aligned with the values of the university, has been vocal against diversity, against equity, against inclusion, against things that the university stands for. And specifically, it was pointed out some of the things along with her alignment with Charlie Kirk's situation and wanting to implement a Turning Point Academy or USA in every public school. We know what that is about, the rhetoric that's spewed in those groups. But even beyond that, the First Amendment, which also that organization pushes and values, and this potential speaker is supposed to value, the students have a right to voice their opinions. And I stand with them wholeheartedly in their right to do so. That is what democracy is about. The students don't like a decision, so they voiced it to the administration. My problem is Ms. Evatt then took to social media to attack those students, calling them a woke mob and leftist radicals. These are students, these are scholars, these are people's children who pay tuition to go to school in this state. Nothing less than that. And they have the right to voice their opinions. And so I'm troubled by that, which makes it clear in my mind that they were on the right path. Because if you can't accept someone's opinion that you don't agree with and you start to attack them, and then double down and say that you will absolutely end DEI on all campuses, that's just a direct attack against the students and their families. So I'm troubled by that and concerned, and I stand with the students in their decision to voice their concerns, and just wanted to put that out there, catching up on everything. But as a graduate of South Carolina State University, that's a special day, and it's sad that we are here with people who want to run our government attacking students, attacking scholars for simply exercising their First Amendment right, which they're supposedly all for freedom.
We can't pull back what's out on social media. We can't pull back what people think. But I certainly don't want people to think that the students here at South Carolina State University, future educators, doctors, lawyers, attorneys, scientists, business owners, are thugs, or think that they're a mob. And I welcome anyone on this campus, in this state, in this nation, to come onto this campus and have a constructive dialogue, exchange ideas and viewpoints with our students, with you, because I know I've watched many of you for 4 years now, and I know that you can hold your own against the best of them. And with that being said, I know the temperature in the country now, and because of what's out there now, I don't want anyone showing up on this campus thinking that something is different and not knowing what those thoughts may lead to. And I certainly would never intentionally place our students, our faculty, or our staff, or our visitors in harm's way.
Constitution. This is a violation of the Constitution. I will not allow you to destroy our democracy. This is a violation of the Constitution. It is. It's a violation of the Constitution. I'm out of order. The law are doing illegal things to the state of Florida. It is out of order. It is out of order. It is out of order.
In 79, I come from a Jim Crow era where blacks were second class citizens. It will not happen again.
Emotions are running high here at the Florida State Capitol in Tallahassee, where Governor Ron DeSantis just proposed new maps that could add 4 more seats for Republicans and could greatly diminish the voices of Democratic voters.
It's just not fair. It's just not legal. It's just not right. It's not good for our democracy.
And this latest round of gerrymandering here in Florida brought Democrats from across the state here to the Capitol out in protest.
Hands off our maps! Hands off our maps!
Now, Republicans control the state House, the state Senate, and the governor's mansion here in Florida, which means that even though the legislature needs to vote on this proposal, it's widely expected to pass.
They're trying to dilute and get rid of those districts so they have any voice at all.
You could say one thing directly to Governor DeSantis right now. What would you tell him?
Get your hands off of our voting rights. I've just had enough of it, and I think all of us have.
I think he's trying to project strength by projecting control, But I think it's obviously coming from a place of weakness. I mean, if he had nothing to be scared of, he wouldn't have to do this.
And for some voters like Loman Oliver, who grew up during Jim Crow, he says this moment is drawing parallels to the disenfranchisement of his childhood.
I feel bad about it. Not for me, because I have a short time being here. But for my grandchildren, my great-grands, I do not want them going through what I experienced. Being
Hey y'all, it's United States Senate candidate and Florida State Representative Angie Nixon here. Y'all, I'm so upset because I had to disrupt the House proceedings yet again because they were just trying to push through illegally drawn maps that diminish representation in the Black community, that diminish representation in the Latino community, that diminish representation in the Jewish community. This is a slap in the face of voters everywhere in our state. And they're only doing it, Republicans are only doing this so that they can look out for Donald Trump and allow him to have unfettered power. I have a problem with this. That's why I'm running for United States Senate. We have to do something different. I have 5 kids, y'all, with my blended family, and I refuse to allow them to continue to live in a place where their rights are under attack and where people say that they don't matter. If you want something different, y'all, you'll do something different. I need you all to join my People Power campaign at AngieNixon.com. I need you all to donate. I'm up against a machine, a Democratic machine that wants the status quo to continue. AngieNixon.com, y'all. Let's do this.
We're here today in defense of our neighbors with temporary protected status, who are deeply rooted in our communities and essential to our economy. In my opinion, they are already home. At this moment, over 1 million people are at risk of being removed from their homes, separated from their families, having their lives uprooted because of Trump's cruel and unlawful attempt to terminate their temporary protected status. The Supreme Court will hear arguments on this critical case. We are demanding the Supreme Court uphold the law, save lives, and protect our communities. To send vulnerable families to countries like Haiti, Venezuela, and Syria that are enduring horrific humanitarian crises is unconscionable, shameful, unlawful, and preventable. I want to be clear, this is not an appeal for charity or even benevolence. This is simply the right thing to do, the smart thing to do, the responsible thing to do, but not from a place of generosity, but instead from a place of reciprocity. We're here today in defense of our neighbors with temporary and with respect to have an expansive meaning and a broadening effect. The provision thus bars judicial review of both the Secretary's ultimate decision whether to designate, extend, or terminate, and of each antecedent step along the way to that determination. Respondents' attempts to carve out exceptions to the review bar would eviscerate it, because virtually any substantive challenge could be recast as a procedural claim, as their own claims demonstrate. Moreover, their claims plainly cannot be raised without referring to or relying on the termination decisions, and they challenge the very kind of foreign policy-laden judgments that are traditionally entrusted to the political branches. Even if their claims are not barred, they are meritless. The statute does not micromanage the degree of consultation with other agencies. Paragraph B3 requires the Secretary to consider the national interest in reviewing designations made under B1C because it requires her to determine whether the foreign state continues to meet the conditions for designation under paragraph 1. Far from demonstrating pretext, the fact that the Secretary exercised her discretion consistently is a virtue, not a vice.
and the MEO respondent's constitutional claim is meritless under any standard of review. I welcome the court's questions.
What was the practice before the statute was adopted?
That was the EVD practice that's discussed in the the Enbank-Smith decision from the DC Circuit. And that was, I think, properly characterized by Judge Silverman, in his opinion, as essentially a forbearance policy that fell within the heartland of Heckler against Cheney. So one of the points we make is that the historical background of this statute is a statute where there was limited, if any, judicial review of executive discretion in that case. And it's telling that President Bush, in his signing statement, objected to Congress moving into this area and entrenching on what he viewed as the executive's traditionally unreviewable discretion. So it's unsurprising in that context that Congress passed a judicial review bar that at least partially accommodated the executive's constitutional objection to the sort of imposition of these kinds of regulations in that particular area.
If the president or the executive branch has constitutional authority to do this in a discretionary way, can Congress limit that?
We don't dispute that here. President Bush obviously objected on that ground, but we don't dispute that Congress can move in here. And what they've done, as we envision it, they have moved into an area that was a really kind of a forbearance or an enforcement policy regime, and they've elevated to a particular status and said, here are the criteria for regulating that status. And we don't dispute that Congress has the authority to do that.
Are there any examples of that discretionary authority being challenged?
You mean in this particular case or more generally?
More generally.
Well, there is the DED. I'm not sure if this is responsive to the question, but there is the DED policy that's kind of as I understand it, a successor of the EVD. I won't call it I guess, program, you could call it, from the 1980s. So there are situations where the executive exercises enforcement discretion here. When it comes to TPS, Congress has entered the area, has created it as a particular immigration status, and we don't dispute that Congress can do that here.
Counsel, you rely on Trump versus Hawaii in your argument, but that involved the president and entry restrictions. Here we're concerned with the secretary and in aliens that are already present. Your argument is a significant expansion of Trump versus Hawaii, isn't it?
Well, I point to what the court said in the particular paragraph where it discusses why rational basis review would apply here as opposed to a more stringent review under Arlington Heights. The court pointed to features like this is neutral on its face, which we have here. It's within the core of the executive responsibility, which you also have here. It's freighted with foreign relations concerns and national security concerns. Those kinds of criteria are all present here. Obviously, as the court correctly, as you correctly point out, the president was involved and it was an exclusion as opposed to people who are already here under a kind of status. However, the court did go on to say that Trump versus Hawaii applies across different contexts and constitutional claims. In the cases that it's cited, like Kleindentz against Mandel and the other Matthews against Diaz, and other cases that are cited there are also cases that didn't have those particular features of it. So for those reasons, we think Trump against Hawaii provides the rational basis standard for their constitutional claim. However, if the court goes the other way, we also claim that, as I said before, that's meritless under any standard of review.
Can I take you back to the EVD discussion that you had with Justice Thomas? Although President Bush may have objected to the restrictions and the intent to cabin the secretary's discretion, wasn't it Congress's view that the EVD program was seriously flawed? In fact, I'm quoting now from the legislative history, seriously flawed and in urgent need of reform.
That certainly may have been the views of some legislators. What we know—
No, I'm talking about the House report, that the reason why the TPS came into being, and we still don't have the EVD unregulated scheme, was because Congress was concerned about the fact that, for example, quote, the conditions under which safe haven may be granted, extended, or terminated do not appear in any regulation. That it appeared as though the executive was exercising its discretion in an unregulated fashion. And so Congress created this statute in order to restrict the executive. And wasn't that the reason why President Bush was objecting to it?
Well, I can't speak for President Bush. I don't dispute most of what you said. We do believe Congress moved into an area where there was really, a perception at least of kind of unfettered discretion, unregulation, set forth sort of broad and highly discretionary criteria in which the—
All right, so are those reviewable in your view? Now we have a statute in which Congress has clearly required the secretary to take certain statutory steps to include, for example, consultation. Are those reviewable in your view?
No, what is not reviewable is any determination with respect to.
I'm asking you what is reviewable. Is it reviewable for a person to allege that the secretary made this determination without following the statutory steps?
Certainly not.
Not.
That would be a determination with respect to, for example, here
So what was the
termination
point of Congress putting this statute into being and having requirements for the secretary if there was no ability for anyone to challenge the secretary's compliance?
Congress may presume, as this court frequently does, that the executive would be presumed to act within the bounds of that it's set forth, and Congress provided for ongoing congressional oversight. So there's an annual reporting requirement. There is a 6 to 18 month situation. So in a sense, judicial review is kind of a misfit with this particular statute because the secretary has to go back every 18 months and reconsider. And a judicial review, as we see here.
What do you do with the precedents of this court? And I'm thinking about Bowen, and I'm thinking about, there's another one in which we don't agree that a determination is what you're saying it is. In other words, in Bowen, we specifically indicated that, and it used very similar language, and we said, Bowen used the language, any determination of the amount of benefits under the Medicare statute was in the judicial review bar. And we said that provision, quote, simply does not speak to challenges mounted against the method by which such amounts are to be determined rather than the determinations themselves. We drew a clear distinction that included the word and concept of determination. So how do you distinguish that from this?
As to Bowen, the statute in Bowen actually had an affirmative grant of the power to judicial review. So as to the Part A Medicare benefits that were issued there, the statute said we are affirmatively granting judicial review of those to an extent. And then in a prior case, this court in Erica has said we sort of imply from that there is no judicial review of Part B. Then when it came to Bowen, the court said, well, we're not going to take that negative inference and hold that satisfies the judicial review.
Your position seems to be, and you said it in your opening, any step in the process is not subject to judicial review. If the secretary posted a notice on X saying, quote, I hereby terminate Sirius TPS program effective tomorrow, you would say that there's no judicial review of that decision.
Correct.
That means that even though the statutory requirements required her to post this not on X, but on the Federal Register, it requires that TPS holders be given 60 days notice of the termination. It requires that she consult with department agencies, and she doesn't. Let's assume it, all right? That none of those procedural steps required by the statute are reviewable. That's your position.
Correct.
So the agency could have said, Congress could have said, any termination of TPS status is unreviewable, but it didn't. It did a different formulation. It did determination of termination. That seems to me very close to McNary, where we said you can't challenge the substantive conclusion, but you can challenge the procedural or policies underlying that choice. I don't see how you differentiate McNary.
I would point to three things to distinguish McNary. And keep in mind, our position is that there is no McNary exception here at all. But if there is, the court disagrees.
But what you're basically saying is Congress wrote a statute for no purpose because it set forth procedural steps that had to be followed. And the Constitution, as we have said, due process applies to any alien who lives in the United States. It applies to all people living here. I know you have said unlawfully, but at least these people, until the termination, are here lawfully and with permission. They're entitled to due process. And now Congress has given them a process. It may not be a court process, but that's okay. It's a process. And you're saying that the president, it's unreviewable whether the president has followed that process.
The secretary and what Congress said.
You said a moment ago that there were 3 points in response to my colleague's question. Could you just briefly mention those?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, 2 buckets, and the first has 3 points. So the first bucket is we say there is no McNary exception that's implied by this statute. And McNary differs in text. There's textual differences in the statute. There's the subject matter, the sort of decision that is exempted from judicial review, as I said at the beginning, is the sort of thing that is traditionally, entrusted to the political branches. And then there's the historical background that I discussed with Justice Thomas in the beginning. So if you look at the textual differences, a determination where both McNary and Reno said that determination is used in a specialized sense in that particular statute is different than any determination with respect to.
Thank you. I got it.
So I'm not quite sure. Not so long ago, you came in and said that every executive officer has to be answerable to the president. So the president's statements have to be attributable to its executive officers, to the secretary. I don't see how you can take both positions. Either an executive follows the president's orders or it doesn't.
I would point to what the court said, or at least the Chief Justice's opinion. Regents discussed this and said the president's at a certain remove from this decision. The statute places vests this decision in the secretary, and the secretary.
But if the secretary here, Noam, said she was following the president's policy. That's what she announced when she was reviewing these items. I don't know how we can't attribute what the president have said his policy is when she herself says she's following it.
We know what the president directed her to do because it's in the Executive Order 14159, the Invasion Proclamation, where the president said specifically respect to TPS that she should ensure that, or he now,
but that doesn't give her a right to do what I started with, which is to announce the termination of this policy in contravention of every procedural step, which was a hypothetical I gave you. You're saying that's not reviewable.
But baked into the very concept of a judicial review bar is the possibility that the decision that's not subject to judicial review might be totally baseless, arbitrary, wrongly decided, or really crazy.
Well, that's true, General. But I guess the question is in what? I mean, this judicial review bar is a broad one, means something. If there's a completely arbitrary understanding of what the country conditions are, there's nothing a court can do about that, right? So, basically Congress has said, this can be the weirdest, strangest, most arbitrary conclusion as to country conditions, and the courts still can't do anything. So point taken there. But that's a different thing than to say that all the things that the statute says that the secretary is supposed to do in order to determine country conditions are themselves unreviewable. I'm sorry, I'm losing my voice. Because what the statute says is, look, she shall review country conditions after consultation. And if she decides, I don't feel like consulting, and more to the point, I don't even feel like reviewing country conditions, I want to do some completely different kind of analysis to determine whether to make this designation. Is it really feasible that Congress meant for those decisions to be unreviewable?
I think
I'm really sorry. Go ahead. And it's the likelihood of my asking a follow-up is very, very diminished.
Congress said any determination with respect to designation, extension, or termination is not subject to judicial review. And EPA against Calumet, this court talked about.
Right, but the determination, you say, I'm already going. I mean, the determination can refer straight back to what the secretary is supposed to determine. which is whether the conditions for designation continue to be met. Okay, that's it.
I mean, they make an argument like this. They say determination is used in a specialized sense in the statute. I just think that textually is baseless. I mean, by my count, determination is used in this one statutory section in 5 different senses. It talks about things about your eligibility for benefits. That's a determination. Admissibility, that's a determination. Whether there's extreme hardship.
But does that hurt you or help you? I mean, I'll pick up where Justice Kagan left off. You know, we have specific things in the statute that Congress says the secretary has discretion to determine. And then Congress also has parts of the statute that directs the secretary specifically with respect to the steps that she is to take in order to make those determinations. So I just think you're kind of struggling against what seems to be the most obvious way and the most straightforward way to understand this statute, which is that when the judicial review bar says that the courts cannot review the determinations of the secretary, it is referencing the things, the substantive conclusions that the secretary must make under the statute. And some of them are, you know, not the ultimate. Some of them are findings. For example, the secretary has to make certain findings, says the statute, and I could see how those could be determinations. So it's not that we're just looking for the word determination in the statute, but we're understanding that Congress has directed this secretary in this statute, in contrast with the prior regime, to make certain findings, make certain determinations, and here is how you go about doing it. And so my question is, when someone says the secretary has not followed those steps, she didn't consult, she didn't put it in the right place in terms of notice. This is Justice Sotomayor's example. It's very hard, I think, to say that the judicial review bar, which speaks only to the determinations of the secretary, precludes that kind of claim.
2 points. Determination is a broad term, as the court held in EPA against Calumet, that encompasses any decision, opinion, or conclusion. So,
including the decision not to follow the steps. That's your point.
Right. When it says any, I'd say 2 things about that. When it says any determination with respect to here a termination decision,
it means any decision not to follow the steps that we've put in this statute.
So if there's a determination that, oh, I don't think there are any appropriate agencies to consult with here, and therefore I'm not to consult, that's a determination within the plain meaning of that term. But more fundamentally, it bars judicial review. Certainly, everyone concedes it bars judicial review of that final determination. And look at it in the context of this case, where both sets of plaintiffs have filed complaints.
Yes, we concede that, but they're saying that's not all the kinds of claims we'd like to make. And we're just now focusing on the kinds of claims that aren't the final determination. They're the secretary's decision, and I had a hypothetical, to pull out a Ouija board. The secretary says, you know how I'm going to figure this out? I'm going to, another example, put Syria in a hat and, Haiti in a hat on a slip of paper and all the countries, and I'll pull out the ones that get TPS. And that's not following the statutory steps. She's made a determination to do that. And your view would be that no judicial review of that claim.
And any exception that the court would craft here would be something that a truck could be driven through, and that's what we see in the lower courts, and that's what we see in the briefing in this case.
All right.
I mean, look, for example,
General, can I ask you a question? You seem to concede that the constitutional claims are not barred by this very same provision. Is that right? And if so, why?
We are, under Webster against Doe, DeMoore against Kim, and so forth, we haven't disputed that there be maybe a little extra clear statement that would be required to exclude constitutional claims. We just haven't disputed that in this case. We're not asking the court to revisit Webster, for example.
So you think Webster's on all fours with this?
I don't know if it's on all fours. We think Webster and DeMoore are strong enough to indicate that under those cases, we'd have to be fighting with those cases, so to speak, to argue that there's no judicial review of the constitutional claims here. And here, of course, we think the constitutional claims, it's not a close call, basically. But we have not disputed that. We don't argue that the judicial review bar extends to the constitutional claim.
So, counsel, let's go back to the Chief's question on Hawaii. Assume that I disagree with you and that Arlington Heights applies because Hawaii and all of the cases that you cited supporting it involve aliens coming into the United States, not aliens in the United States. So let's assume that I believe that due process requires some process for aliens who are here to be removed. Then we can argue about what that process is and how binding it is or not. But if it's Arlington Heights, a discriminatory purpose just needs to be a reason, not the only reason for acting, correct?
A motivating factor, I think is what it
Motivating factor. Now, this court has explained an additional purpose to discriminate against poor whites would not render nugatory the purpose to discriminate against all blacks. Now, we have a president saying at one point that Haiti is a, quote, filthy, dirty, and disgusting S-hole country. I'm quoting him. And where he complained that the United States takes people from such countries instead of people from Norway, Sweden, or Denmark, where he declared illegal immigrants, which he associated with TPS, as poisoning the blood of America. I don't see how that one statement is not a prime example of the Arlington example at work and showing that a discriminatory purpose may have played a part in this decision.
All the statements that they cite as to the secretary and as to the president, obviously there's an issue there about which one you're going to weigh more heavily. None of them, not a single one of them, mentions race or relates to race in any way.
It certainly does when you're saying we're taking people from these countries, TPS program, which are all non-whites, but instead we should be taking people from Norway, Sweden, or Denmark. It seems to me that that's as close to the Arlington example as you can get.
All those statements in context refer to problems like crime, poverty, welfare dependence, drugs, drug importation.
The Arlington example is, yes, I don't want poor people, but not all people from Norway, Sweden, or Denmark are necessarily rich, but they are all virtually white.
The Chief Justice's opinion in Regents, for example, refers to actually some of the very same statements that they allege here, statements that are now 9, 10 years old.
Regents applied a very different standard of review because of the nature of the applicant. This is a very different question. This is whether a race-based classification can be or should be permitted to be a motivating factor.
I strongly disagree with that. Regents assumed that Arlington Heights would apply, and it said these kinds of statements are unilluminating. They, raise no plausible inference of discriminatory animus.
What about poisoning the blood of Americans?
If you could look at those statements in context, again, they're clearly talking about problems like
What about bad
crime.
genes, quote unquote?
Again,
also
poverty,
not racially.
Yeah, they presented them wrenched from context. You can look at each one of those statements. They're talking about problems of crime, poverty, welfare dependency. Again, problems that have been emphasized again and again by not just President Trump, not just the secretary, but many others who favor a tough immigration policy. And if the position of the district courts
the position of the United States is that we have to have an actual racial epithet, that we aren't allowed to look at all the context to include the president's insistence that immigrants from certain countries, largely, if not almost exclusively, countries with African immigrants, Black African immigrants, are not allowed, and calling these sorts of names and the types of things he said about Haiti. At the same time, that it is the policy of the United States to encourage and welcome immigrants from places like Norway and Denmark and white South Africans. Your view is that it's not appropriate for the court to take into account that kind of evidence or the context in which all of this is happening.
It's our view that those statements that they allege, which include statements that were before the court in both Trump against Hawaii and Regents, keep in mind this is the third time this kind of claim has come before this court. It rejected in Trump against Hawaii, rejected it
right,
again
but the
in
immigration policy, the idea, the white South African immigration policy is recent. So that wasn't in Trump against Hawaii. That wasn't the statements about Haiti and eating pets and the names that were called with respect to these immigrants, even though they are lawfully in the United States, those are pretty recent. So let's separate it out then. What do you say about those kinds of things?
Again, as the court held in Regents, these are statements made in different contexts that are remote in time. They are unilluminating. The court said
decade that followed emancipation in the years after the Civil War, more than a dozen Black men would go on to serve in the halls of Congress as U.S. representatives and U.S. senators during a period known as Reconstruction. During the Reconstruction era, Black political power thrived, and so did our communities. We opened schools, we started businesses, we bought land, we provided for our communities. This period was brief, with Reconstruction lasting only 10 years. And by 1901, thanks to new Black codes and Jim Crow laws, not a single Black American remained in the halls of Congress. It wasn't until the 1970s, after the passage of the Voting Rights Act, that another Black American from the Deep South would be elected to Congress. Today, the Supreme Court sharply narrowed the protections of the Voting Rights Act. In the decades since its passage, what's known as Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act has allowed for Americans to challenge unfair and rigged maps that have discriminatory impacts. Today's ruling means impact is no longer enough. If the Black voters who make up nearly 40% of the state of Mississippi are no longer able to elect representation, they have to prove the map maker's intent was to disenfranchise Black Americans, a move that Justice Ketanji Brown's equates to the complete demolition of the Voting Rights Act.
Staying home isn't an option.
Come out, show up, show out.
Join the fight.
Join the fight. And when we fight, we will win.
This International Workers' Day, let's flex our power.
People power, people politics.